Hi, I'm Greg.
And I'm Leanne.
Welcome to the Empowered Poly Podcast, where we give you the tools to help you feel more empowered
in your polyamorous and consensually non-monogamous relationships
by sharing what we've learned as relationship coaches and as individuals.
Empowered Poly is LGBTQ2IA+, alternative lifestyle, and kink-friendly.
Thank you for joining us,
and enjoy the show.
Hello, and welcome to episode 40, the big 40. Today, we're going to talk about cheating in polyamory and CNM. I think it's worth mentioning. This is the big 40. We've done
I know, we're so old.
Jesus, right?
We're grown-ups now.
You told me before we started recording, we've been doing this for 4 years, right?
It's actually the anniversary of our first podcast this month.
Right. And so that means that we've done 10 per year.
Roughly. I don't know.
Roughly.
I didn't count.
Yeah.
But
that's crazy,
yeah.
Hey? 40.
Well, and that's sort of what we aspired to when we started, because we didn't want to overtax ourselves in terms of time and investment into the podcast. We knew it was important to do. So we wanted to be fairly regular with it, but we didn't want to make it a chore, right? We wanted to keep it light and fun for us. And so we're going to discuss something really light and fun today.
Yeah. Cheating. Woohoo. Okay. So what is cheating? What is cheating? What is it cheating to you?
Oh, for me, cheating would be breaking an agreement. So that could also look like moving ahead without making agreements too, for me. I have had partners that have made assumptions about me and my being okay with them going ahead and starting another relationship or having intimacy with someone else, because I identify as polyamorous, and we hadn't yet had any conversations that I would have had to have prior to that happening about what that would look like, or what safety protocols sexually they might put in place, or what they need or I need in those circumstances, right? So yeah, I think it's really important to be mindful of your agreements or lack thereof.
Right. And what if you don't have agreements, though?
Yeah.
What if you don't want to have agreements?
Well, not having agreements is an agreement.
Right. But if you don't have agreements, then how can you cheat?
I'll put that back to you.
Right. Well, so to me, cheating means it's a breach of trust. So
I have a trust in my partner that they will or will not do something.
Yeah.
And no agreement around it.
No, not necessarily. Not for me. I mean, I like agreements. I fucking love them.
We like
I love agreements. I mean,
but we're talking in this case, you brought up
in general. Yeah.
What if you don't?
Right. So what if you don't? So I think to me, cheating is a breach of trust. So let's say you do something that you know or potentially think that will impact your partner in a negative way, and you don't tell them about it. That to me is a breach of trust. And so that would be cheating.
Right. It
doesn't necessarily have to be sexually related either.
Right.
For
sure. So in terms of consent, there's a certain amount of information that a partner may wish to have in order to give fully informed consent to be in a relationship with you. Right.
Yep.
Whether it's a non-monogamous open relationship that is based on intimacy of the physical kind, or an emotional attachment, it doesn't matter. So there's that. I know someone in the community, for example, whose only agreement is that they and their partners won't do anything that would harm someone in the polycule. Okay, so that's the big umbrella agreement. What is that specifically, right? That could be some gray area for people. That could be, you see it one way, I see it another. You see it as harmful, I don't, etc.
There's a lot of subjectivity to that. Yeah,
there is. So there might be opportunity to have a discussion with somebody about what that meant for them, if that's their overarching agreement, their only one, right? Get some
Yeah.
clarity.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that would drive me nuts, actually. I mean, to each their own. Like, I'm not judging.
For
I'm just saying
sure.
that for me personally, I couldn't operate from a healthy perspective under an agreement that was just that broad in scope. I need specifics. I need to know exactly what is expected of me and expected is a stretch, but exactly what I'm agreeing to and what other
Hmm.
people are agreeing to when it comes to specific behaviors, intentions, etc. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, so for me, it's that breach of trust, right? An example could be, okay, so let's say there's an agreement in place between two people that they won't have unprotected sex with other partners outside of their relationship. But let's say that one of the partners is in a moment and they have unprotected sex.
Hmm.
So technically, that could be seen as cheating. But if they go back to their partner and say, "Hey, look, I did this thing," right? It's technically not a breach of trust at that point because you're bringing the information back to the partner that you did a thing and you're making them aware and giving them all of the information they need to move forward with how they feel about consent and what they need to do. So maybe they need to wrap it before, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. Use
put
barriers until
yeah,
you're tested again.
yeah,
That sort of thing.
exactly. The breach of trust would be if they didn't tell them,
Right. Right. And that
right?
one of the things that we are going to do today, it's going to be the primary focus, I think, is to focus on the reasons why people cheat,
Yeah.
not to justify cheating.
Nope.
Let's put that out there.
Nope. Not
Um,
justifying it.
but for understanding and so that we can be proactive in our relationships if we see that these reasons might be a thing for someone. So you can look at past behaviors in previous relationships. You can look at current behaviors in your own relationship, and frankly, just ask, have those conversations, right?
Yeah.
Full
Yeah.
disclosure, I have cheated,
So
right?
have I several
And
times repeatedly.
yeah, and I think that uh, I had reasons for doing what I did, and I still have remorse, and I still feel guilty, and I wish I hadn't done it. All of those things, right? It's not. We're not saying cheating is a any kind of a way of coping with not getting your needs met. Okay.
I have a question before we jump into that, though, and
Yeah.
maybe that'll be answered when we jump into this. But are there exceptions to that?
Are there
Are there
exceptions
exceptions where
to?
cheating could be ethically or morally okay?
Well,
If we're talking about cheating be a broken agreement or a breach of trust, are there situations where it might be okay?
might be okay. Well, I certainly felt like it was okay when I did it. Um, and I'm going to say the reasons that I had were numerous. Needs were not being met for extended periods of time, years. Um, and I was not thriving as an individual. I still think that ethically, I had a responsibility to behave better than I did.
Mhm.
But at the time, I didn't feel I could be honest.
Right.
That
And we'll
it,
get to that. Actually, we'll
yeah,
talk about those reasons. Well, what comes to mind for me when I ask myself that question is that if telling your partner puts you in physical harm
yeah,
or emotional harm, right? So if you're in an abusive relationship, for instance,
or
and
financial
you
harm.
or financial harm, right? So if you're in an abusive relationship and this
Hmm.
person has control over you financially, you're unable to get out, maybe it puts your kids in danger and you've done a thing because that's the thing that you thought you should do at the time
Hmm.
and not telling your partner. I think from a moral perspective, I think that could be understood, right?
Hmm.
In terms
There's
of like,
yeah,
yeah, it's just like everything, it's on a spectrum, right? Everything is There is no black or white when it comes to morality and ethics and stuff. But the reality is that there are situations where I think it would be understandable that you would make those decisions to not share that information with a partner.
Hmm. Hmm. Or if you thought that potentially that would lead to self-harm on their behalf, that can also be a consideration for people.
Mm-hmm.
Um, there's many reasons why people choose not to disclose cheating.
Yeah.
Um, and I think those are kind of understandable reasons. We're trying to get to the place of curiosity, compassion, and looking at cheating as, a symptom of something else that's going on, not necessarily the only problem, right? It's
Right.
usually symptomatic of greater issues. So
Right.
we're going to talk about those greater issues.
Yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
So we have this lovely list that my beautiful and amazing,
Oh,
intelligent wife created.
yes, I did.
And so, well, why don't we just jump into it? I'll start with the first one.
Okay.
Okay. So boundary confusion, lack of clarity or agreement on rules or boundaries, such as not notifying a partner before pursuing someone new. Now, obviously, you and I have our own take on rules and stuff, right? So we don't really believe in rules in a relationship. So this
Mhm.
kind of speaks to the one that you just already talked about, which is breaking an agreement, right?
Yeah. And so when you were talking about boundary confusion without clarity, like if we have that big umbrella that we were just talking about of, I, trust that my partners will not, do anything to harm anyone in the polycule. It can be too gray for some people to really discern for themselves what is acceptable. Yeah.
Me, I'm just raising my hand saying that I would
Oh,
be
that's
one of
you.
those people. I would be
Yeah.
one of those people that, and for those listening, I just raised my hand. I don't know why the fuck I just did that. Anyway, let's keep going. But yeah, so I think one of the ways to avoid that
Hmm.
is that if you are the person that's in a relationship with somebody who is that nebulous with their boundaries and that makes you feel uncomfortable or brings up levels of discomfort for you that you're not okay with, then you need to ask them, what do you consider to be cheating? What would be a breach of trust in your mind?
Hmm.
Right? So that you then have clarity around what that looks like.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And, it might feel to the other person like it's too big to really nail down all the situations, right?
Of course,
But
right?
if you can get some good solid examples, then you can extrapolate from those examples.
Right. And then also further to that, if you're ever in doubt and you're about to do something,
Hmm.
don't do it.
Yes. And here, thank you for saying that. So, as someone who has cheated, I know how challenging that can be.
Yeah, totally.
However, I also have made a lot of efforts and changes to how I behave in the world, including around being in my integrity. And part of that, being in my integrity, is not acting on everything that I want to do. Period. That's just not something that I allow myself. There was a time when I did. I was, I lacked some impulse control. And I have since learned how detrimental that can be to your life
Yeah.
and your
Yeah.
relationships.
And it's interesting because when I think about my own journey through that and through infidelity, I think about the times that I did it. I knew it was wrong,
Yeah.
so I did it, but I did it anyway,
Hmm.
right? So there was a foundational rupture happening either within me or within my relationship
Or
that,
both.
or both, right? That made the decision to do it um, easier to justify.
Yes.
But ultimately, it was still my responsibility. Ultimately, the actions and the responsibility of those actions and the impact and the harm that they caused falls on me.
Right.
So this isn't about trying to excuse the behavior. This isn't about trying to shirk responsibility. All we're
Yeah.
trying to do is provide information that we think would be helpful to people in avoiding this. So if you find yourself in a situation where you are confused about boundaries, then you need to ask your
Yeah.
partner what exactly is going, what, like we said, right? So that's kind of where we're coming from with this. So, okay,
Okay. Shall we
next
move
one.
on?
Yeah.
Number two, emotional neglect, feeling emotionally neglected by one or more partners and seeking validation or attention outside of the agreed structure.
Yeah. This one was one for you. Like you
Oh,
were big, like in the stories that you
huge.
shared with me, you went through years of this.
Yeah. Yeah. 4 years. It
That's
was awful.
years.
It was awful.
Yeah.
And when someone is starting to feel emotionally neglected, the onus is on them to speak about it. And it can be scary. And sometimes it's not safe. And so you can't, right? But when when we add the cheating into the already dysfunctional relationship, it doesn't help it get better. It might sort of, be a temporary salve for the feelings and the wounds, but it's not going to create a healthier dynamic.
Are we looking for it to get better when we take that action in an emotionally neglected relationship?
I don't know. I think it's internally motivated. Like I want to feel better, right? Um, and I would like it's not necessarily about leaving the relationship. Maybe I don't want to. Maybe there's like in my case, this is with my daughter's father. I had a child that was very young. I didn't want to disrupt their life. And I really did love him. I really did want to make it work. I was hopeful. And, even after years of neglect, I was still kind of hoping it would work out. Um, and then I think I had a sort of realization moment of, yeah, that's probably not going to happen. And
Mhm.
so moving ahead with the other relationship did help me feel better. In fact, it helped me gain the self-esteem to step out of the relationship.
Interesting.
So I don't want to
Interesting.
justify it again, but I'm just saying
Right.
that's what happened to me.
Yeah.
Um, and the result was the marriage ended, which it should have anyway.
Right.
Yes.
Which speaks to the nuance of all of this, right? There is no black
Mhm.
and white. There is no clear way forward here. We're not trying to say that this is an all or nothing thing. You either do this or you're a bad person. That's not at all what's
No.
happening here. There are just so many different ways to try to get those needs met, right? And try to get that neglect, to shirk it off, to get rid of it, right? Be like,
Mhm.
fuck, I can't deal with this. Like, but you don't want to end one thing and start up another thing because of a host of different reasons. So yeah, that could be a really challenging place to be for sure.
Mhm. And ironically, I met that spouse through polyamory.
Yeah.
He was my first polyamorous lover when I was married to my first husband. So
Yeah.
um he had decided that he was monogamous and that's how he wanted to conduct himself moving forward. And so I knew he wouldn't be open to polyamory. And
Right.
yeah, so that wasn't an option. And I did the thing that
Yeah.
I thought I needed at the time, which uh, you know, is understandable, but also I did make amends to him and, apologized later. And yeah, so
Yeah.
yeah,
Right. Should we move on?
please.
Please take the focus off of me. Well, good news
Mhm.
for you is that the next one is could put the focus on me. So thrill
Excellent.
seeking, craving, craving the adrenaline rush of secrecy, even in an open structure. So I'll
Mhm.
start by sharing that this was one of the reasons that I cheated. was I needed that sense of adventure. I needed and I cheated in a non-monogamous relationship. So
Mm-hmm.
I needed that sense of adventure. I needed the newness, the novelty, right? Esther Perel talks about that, right? And mating in
Mm-hmm.
captivity. The idea that once a relationship reaches a certain point, it loses its novelty.
Yeah.
But we are creatures of novelty. We need that in our lives. And so how do we find that within our given relationship? Well, frankly, at that point, I didn't feel safe enough to try to find it. And so I
Mm-hmm.
looked for it elsewhere in secrecy. And to be frank with you, the secrecy element was part of the thrill.
Yeah.
Without the secrecy, it wouldn't have been as novel. It wouldn't have been as adventurous or as thrilling. And to me, that's a really interesting thing because there's kink related to secrecy,
Yeah.
right? And so that can
Mm-hmm.
be challenging. Like, how do you get that need met? How do you explore that kink without breaching trust?
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
think maybe you get in a relationship with the person that says that the only boundary I have is we won't do anything to hurt each other, you know? But
Yeah.
even then it's like, well, you're do you need the boundaries in order to for the secrecy to be sexy? And if you're in a relationship with someone who doesn't really want boundaries or agreements, well, not boundaries, but who doesn't want agreements,
Mm-hmm.
does that take some of the spice away from it?
Probably. I mean,
Probably.
here's the thing. The problem with taboo kinks is that they're taboo. So how do you achieve them ethically, right?
Right.
And so sometimes it's role play, sometimes it's having a don't ask, don't tell agreement. And then there is that element of like having to keep it under wraps, right? I
Hmm.
know people who have done that as a way of meeting that need. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, but ultimately it comes down to a need for the sense of adventure.
Hmm.
I think, at least for me anyway, that was what my experience was I needed that sense of adventure. I needed that thrill seeking bit, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
And so there
The
were ways,
rush.
and yeah, in retrospect, there were ways that I could have gotten that met without doing what I did.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah. And that reflective process after you've had, a breach of trust in your relationship and you've been the cause of it, or you haven't been the cause of it, but you were maybe not the safe space, right? So sometimes there is a shared responsibility here in creating the environment where cheating happens. If you're not creating that safe space for your partner, they don't feel that they can come to you with their needs, then what are they going to do for themselves, right? And how much of that can
Yeah.
they do with you?
That's part of the process of our personal responsibility worksheet process is what's my role in this? Even if I was
Hmm.
the person that was cheated on, I still have a
Hmm.
role in this. And what role did I play in this?
Right. Yeah. For
Right?
example, in my past with my previous spouse, the emotional neglect for 4 years wasn't coming from me,
Right.
right? And he was very aware of it and very sort of solid in his position on it. And um, there wasn't much to be done from my perspective. He refused counseling, for example. And
Hmm.
so, yeah, there's things like we can ask for help. We can be willing to get help. We can be willing to self-reflect and to continue to open the lines of communication in our relationships as we're experiencing challenges.
Right.
Number 4, conflict avoidance. Oof. Avoiding those difficult conversations about dissatisfaction by bypassing agreements. So
Hmm.
instead of saying, I no longer agree to this, can we renegotiate or discard this agreement? Which is what we recommend. Someone will just bypass the agreement altogether and do as they like because they are afraid of having that challenging conversation. They're avoiding the conflict at all costs. And what have we learned about conflict?
Conflict is actually healthy for relationships. It's how
Mm,
trust is built. which is interesting that you take the option of breaching the trust when the alternative could actually build trust in the relationship by having those difficult and potentially conflicting conversations, right?
Yeah. I've
Right.
had clients
But
who've come to me and said, after my partner came out to me as whatever they came out to them as, poly or open or queer or whatever, um, they're like, there was like this period where I was so in love with them because I loved that they were able to come to me and share that and they trusted me with it and I felt very close to them, right?
mhm, yeah, totally. That's probably the exception and not the rule. There's probably more out there in the world that tends to lean towards, avoiding that conflict might be because of certain behaviors, because of certain things that have been said, maybe, or feelings, or known entities in terms of how do you feel about this particular subject and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Having said that, there is a way to broach subjects that would potentially lead to a better understanding of how your partner feels about it. For
Mm-hmm.
instance, one of the things is that if you're one of the people that is in a monogamous relationship and you find yourself interested in poly or some sort of non-monogamous dynamic, instead of just going out and acting on it, maybe give yourself some time to do the research and then share that research with your partner in sort of kind of casual ways, maybe over dinner. Hey, I was reading something the other day in this article on such and such, and it brought up non-monogamy. What are your thoughts on non-monogamy? Right. And you can get some feedback from them on how they feel about it, and that will inform how you approach them.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it is a bit of a delayed gratification kind of thing, because you
Yeah.
don't you don't want to act on it immediately, see the impulsive behavior that we talked about earlier. um,
Mm-hmm.
but I think in the long run, if you can go that route, I think in the long run it creates a much more satisfying result.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Next one.
Go ahead.
The next one's a bit redundant, but we're going to do it anyway. Pursuing emotional, sexual, or romantic fulfillment outside the relationship without discussing unmet needs.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so that, C number four really is what that should say, because because that's really ultimately what it comes down to, is like, how do I approach my partner about my unmet needs without fear of them taking it personally?
Oh, they'll take it
Right.
personally, likely.
They will. Yeah. No, no, no. But I said
And
without the fear of them taking it personally.
yes,
So
yes,
they will take it personally, but why do I fear that so much?
right, right.
Right.
And how can I help them work through that?
Yeah.
Right. Because the thing is that if someone is afraid of uh, their partner taking it personally, it's usually because they don't know how to manage themselves in that situation.
Yep.
And what happens is that spiral of conflict where they get defensive, so we get defensive, so they get defensive, so we get defensive.
Hmm.
There's no connection, right? So conflict is a way to make connection possible, but we have to do it in a healthy way, and we have to recognize patterns, and we have to dismantle our own beliefs about conflict and what someone's reaction means. We have to stop
Hmm.
and interrupt that story that we're telling ourselves, right?
Right.
As soon as they start taking it personally as a reflection on them and they're feeling hurt and defensive, we need to step out of our reaction too, right? And not feed into it or lean into it. We need to lean the opposite way into compassion and curiosity and and trying to reassure and recognize that they're in struggle.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And shout out to my new best friend, Dave Cooley, um,
Yes.
who talks about restorative relationships, right? And he
Yeah.
says that leading with empathy and curiosity are foundational to working through those difficult and potentially um, challenging conversations. How can you talk about your unmet needs with your partner before you have before you feel like there's no other choice but to go out and act on it? Well,
Mhm.
leading with empathy and curiosity is really the core. I mean, that was a huge thing for me when I learned that from him. Um, and I think it's fundamental to any healthy conversation, but it's fundamental also to difficult and potentially conflicting conversations.
And just so our listeners or our viewers can catch up with who David Cooley is, he is the co-author of the book Polywise by David Cooley and Jessica Fern, and they
Mhm.
were interviewed on our podcast a few episodes ago. So you
That's right.
can meet him there.
That's why he's my
Um,
new best friend. So yeah. Sorry,
and he
Jessica.
also, yeah, he also did a poly lab with us and our participants this
That's
year.
right. Yep.
So that was a neat opportunity on that very topic.
Hmm.
Okay, number 6, power dynamics, breaking boundaries to assert independence or control in the relationship. Ooh,
Oof.
ooh.
Yeah.
Sometimes when we are looking to step outside of a relationship, break an agreement, breach of trust, it's because we're feeling powerless or we're feeling controlled and we want to assert autonomy. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. Totally. I experienced this. Yeah.
Yeah.
I felt trapped.
Hmm.
I felt I felt I told myself I didn't have a choice.
Yeah.
I mean, it turns out I did, and I always had, but I had convinced myself that didn't have a choice. And because it wasn't necessarily a power dynamic situation, but it certainly was a feeling of being trapped and wanting to assert a sense of independence and control over my own life. The relationship that I was in at the time, we had rules. They weren't even agreements. They were rules, and they were, frankly, in hindsight, they were quite unreasonable.
Mm,
And they were just there weren't. I agreed to them because I didn't think I had a choice. If I didn't agree to them, then my relationship would end, and then things would spiral out of control financially. I would have to move back to the States. Like, it was just a whole thing. I just created this. I would lose my family. Like, you know what I mean? Like, so I didn't feel in control. I felt powerless, even though I
mhm.
wasn't. And I know that in reflection. In the moment, I didn't. And so some of my actions came from that place of I want what I want. I want to feel independent. I want to feel like I have autonomy. And turns
Yeah.
out autonomy was huge for me. And I didn't even realize it up until, I don't know, 5 years ago, 6 years ago,
Mhm.
how important autonomy is to me. So much so that I created a term called relationship autonomist or relationship autonomy. Um,
Mhm.
because that's what I feel. That's what I am, is a relationship autonomist.
And we did a podcast on that
That's right.
as
Check it out.
well. You have a blog on your website about that,
I
a
do.
blog piece.
Yep. Yeah, I do.
Um, Also, regarding the difference between rules and agreements, if you're interested in that, look at our relationship agreements podcast
Yeah. And
or our very
tools
first,
versus rules, our very
yeah, our
first
very
one.
first one.
Hey, look
Yeah,
at
our
that. We're
very first.
circling back to the 40th episode anniversary, right? The
I
first
know,
one,
it's so
tools versus
cool.
rules. Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah. So circle back to those if you want. We don't really have the time or the space to get into the details of all of that right now, but there's definitely some information in there you might find useful if you
Mhm,
feel drawn to the idea of autonomy and independence in your relationships and how that can inform the way you relate. I'm
for
going to shut
sure.
up now about it.
And of course, reach out to us as coaches if you would like more personal help with that.
Yes, do that.
Number 7, resentment and revenge, acting out due to resentment or retaliation for perceived or actual slights.
Yeah, it's a big
Yes,
one.
and they might not even be slights, they might be harmful actions. Do you know what I mean?
Hmm.
So here we have a toxic dynamic that is struggling with unhealthy behaviors already, and we're now deciding that the course of action to take would be to cheat, to exact some sort of revenge. I feel like it's very related to number 6, the power dynamics. I feel like it's very related to feeling like controlled or not having autonomy or something going on there. But it also could just be a, you did that, I'm going to do that too, you know?
Right. It's a very reactive thing,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
It's like, tit for tat, right? I, I mean,
Yeah.
I've had clients in the past that have shared that they cheated because their partner did.
Yes.
And to me, and I'm going to be honest with you, well, I'm always honest, I think, I hope. But to me, what I hear in that is that I'm not taking responsibility for my decisions. I did it because my partner did it. Means that if my partner hadn't done it, I wouldn't have done it. Yeah, I don't know that I buy that. I don't know that that's, I think there's another couple of steps that we need to go through in order to get to the point to where we take responsibility for our decisions in that
Hmm.
moment. And if you find yourself in a position where you are doing it from a place of resentment or revenge, I would invite you to take a step back and
Always.
consider, yeah,
Hmm.
always consider, am I doing this from a place of victim mentality? Like am I trying to assert some dominance or some control, like you said with number six, because I feel like a victim?
Hmm. Hmm.
you know well, you might be, it's very possible that you are a victim of the impact that your partner's choices have on you, and that's shitty and that sucks, but taking revenge by doing the same thing doesn't solve anything.
And I just
um
want to mention too, there's another person likely involved in this that you are now using as a
yep,
tool to
yep,
exact that revenge,
that's
right?
a
Or
really
to,
good point.
yeah. So I wouldn't, uh, a lot of people do this and then feel deep remorse afterwards. Some people do this and then feel some sort of temporary relief afterwards, right? Um,
Temporary being the operative word.
mhm, mhm. And and in self-reflection, recognize two wrongs don't make a right. There was
Hmm.
another person that they utilized for that purpose, and that was not fair to them, et cetera, et cetera. The
Yeah.
impacts just kind of multiply here. So,
Yep, totally.
okay, next one.
All right. So fear of rejection. This one's interesting. Avoiding vulnerability and the risk of being denied permission for new connections. So I find the language in this interesting. Um, Avoiding vulnerability, number one. So
Hmm.
I'm going to avoid being vulnerable with my partner about something that I want to explore or experience
Hmm.
because I think they're going to reject me,
Yeah.
right? I think what happens is if we remove the concept of permission from the equation,
You mean everyone has bodily autonomy?
right? Whoa, crazy,
What?
right? If we remove the concept of permission from the equation
Hmm.
and we take it out of our relationship, I think this one, it doesn't necessarily go away, but it certainly becomes a much less conflict ridden conversation, right? Because I'm not coming to you. I mean, use an example, right? I'm not coming to you and saying, "Hey, I want to get naked for this publication. Are you okay with that?" Right?
Hmm.
I'm
This
not. I'm not
happened.
asking. Yeah, I know. I'm not asking. I was there. I'm not asking permission.
Mhm.
I am asking for permission in that way if I phrase it that way, right?
Right.
If I say to you, "Hey, I want to do this thing. Can I do it? Or are you okay with it?" I'm asking you for permission, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And then there's an opportunity for you to not give that to me, which then would be rejecting me, rejecting that action, that thing I want to do, right?
Hmm.
But if I were to come to you vulnerably and say, "Hey, this is something that's really important to me and I'd really like to explore this and I would love your support. Can you
Hmm.
tell me what it is that you need from me in order to feel better about this or safer or more understanding? What do you need in this situation in order to feel more comfortable?" Now, I'm not telling you I'm not doing it. I'm asking you what you need in order to give me that support. Now, if you come back and say nothing, I don't agree with it, I don't want to do it, I don't want you to do it, I'm like, okay, well, now I know where you stand, and then I can make the choice to do it or not do it at that point.
Well, and there's some level of vulnerability that you kind of skipped over there, which is the
Oh,
sharing of the why it's so important to you, right? Which you did
yeah.
do. So just for everyone's clarification of what happened. You were invited to be a model for a news article about nude beaches in our area. And you really wanted to do it and to be one of the models. And I am not comfortable with public nudity. I'm not a nudist or a naturist or whatever people call themselves. I I I don't really partake, and I was not part of that activity that you enjoyed, and it felt to me kind of like, oh my gosh, everyone, including family, is going to see this potentially, um, colleagues, etc. How do I feel about this? Ultimately, it didn't matter how I felt about it. Ultimately, because you were vulnerable enough to say, these are the reasons why it's important to me, I was able to get on board and support you because of those reasons,
Mhm.
and that's the vulnerability
Yeah.
piece, right? If
Right.
you just go to
Right.
somebody and say, I'm going to do this thing and you might be uncomfortable with it. And so what do you need from me? Uh, Not very vulnerable,
No, no.
right?
Yeah. It's interesting that I didn't talk more about that and sharing that. But thank you. I appreciate you doing that. Thank you. Filling in that
Yeah.
gap because that's a really important piece to the puzzle, right? Removing
Huge. Yeah.
removing the permission aspect, as well as a willingness to step into vulnerability.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that's where that rejection bit can go away because now it's no longer rejection, right? And then also, your partner can feel differently about something than you do, but that doesn't mean that they're rejecting you,
Differentiation.
right? You know?
Yeah. Not taking it so personally if they are uncomfortable, letting them be uncomfortable, being uncomfortable and willing to be uncomfortable with their being uncomfortable.
Right. And then,
Like this is something that we have really started to embrace, you and I, in the
mhm,
last few years of our disentangling work,
yep.
where we recognize, yeah, we don't feel the same way about this, and my partner's uncomfortable, and I'm doing it anyway. And
Hmm.
it feels like I'm going to risk everything, but we don't feel that ultimately when we recognize that at the very base foundation of our relationship, we support each other.
Yes. Right. And I think that's another, and I think we get into this a little bit more. So maybe I'll hold off. Never mind. I'm going to hold
Okay.
off
Okay.
on saying what I was going to say because I think there's another aspect to that, another
Sure.
point to be taken. And we got quite a few left to go, and
We do. We're only
we
on
don't want to
page
keep our
one.
audience around for like 100 years. So,
Yeah.
okay, the next one.
Miscommunication, misunderstanding, or misinterpreting what's acceptable, such as assuming a don't ask, don't tell dynamic. This is about the clarity piece again, I think,
Yeah. Yeah,
right?
I think C number one is what that really
See,
should
number
say is,
one, yeah,
you know,
get the
um,
clarity, and then you feel confident that you know what's not part of the agreement and what is part of the agreement. Yeah.
right. And then speaking to the breach of trust aspect of this, if you do something and it turns out you had a misunderstanding or a misinterpretation of what was acceptable,
Hmm.
right? You
Yeah.
need to own that. You need to own that you did the thing because the breach of
Yeah.
trust happens if you don't own it.
Right.
The breach of trust didn't happen. The breach of trust didn't happen when you did the thing. The breach of trust then happens when you don't own the thing that you did. You can come to your
Yes.
partner and say, "Oh shit, I think I screwed up. I did a thing because I understood it to be this way, when in fact now I see it as this way."
This way. Yeah. Hmm.
Right?
Okay.
So
Number
that's where the
10.
breach of trust. Yes.
Oh,
So
sorry.
yeah, that's okay. No, good. Thanks. Shut me up and let's keep going. Compartmentalization, struggling to integrate emotions or partners, leading to secretive or unaligned actions. Yeah, that's a big one.
Hmm.
Um, we talk about polysaturation level. And for those of you that don't
Hmm.
know what that means that that's the level at which you realize that you're no longer able to engage in any additional relationships and stay present, conscious, and intentional in those relationships.
Hmm.
Right. And so that's the point when you realize, oh shit, I can't give any more of myself to other relationships outside
Hmm.
of the ones that I currently have that are active. And so sometimes, even within the context of those relationships, you might be overgiving in some areas. And so you need to really do the work of making sure that you are being conscious and intentional in the way that you're relating to the people in your life at all times, as opposed to trying to avoid, hide, or neglect, in some cases, certain relationships or certain parts of a relationship.
I just want to point out too that compartmentalization is part of uh, a healthy dynamic when we are doing it in a healthy way. So, for example, I'm on a date with my partner, I'm focused on them, right?
Yep.
I'm not thinking about 17 other things. I'm focused on them, I'm present for them. And then at the end of the date, I can shift gears and look at the other parts of my life, right?
Yep.
Um, Compartmentalization is also maybe part of a healthy parallel poly,
Yep.
right? Or parallel non-monogamy, so that you don't have necessary integration of partners. They never meet.
Mhm.
They have no interest in meeting.
Yeah. That is
Um,
not a requirement, by the way. And to be polyamorous or non-monogamous, your metas don't have to meet.
that
You
means
don't
your
have to meet
partner, you don't have to meet your
partner's
partner's
partner.
partner.
Yeah. So you don't have to meet everybody who's involved with your partner,
Right.
basically. That's just not a requirement, no matter what
Right.
anybody tells you.
And so when we say this, struggling to integrate emotions or partners, we're not necessarily having the struggle of them meeting or socializing together. It could just be we are not, we're really struggling with holding two things to be true at once, right? Or more, right? So I can love
Mhm.
this person and I can love this person.
Well, and I think
That's
to that,
that's
I
an
think also,
awareness and an integration of understanding how your
right,
emotional life in polyamory works, right?
right. And we also live in a world where one of the defining characteristics of a healthy quote unquote relationship is the idea that we don't keep any secrets, that we don't hide anything from each other, and anything means anything, right? And I think that is unhealthy. I think
Me too.
that is very codependent way of relating. And so compartmentalization can also be, hey, I enjoy doing this thing with this partner over here, and that ain't nobody else's fucking business, including my other partners,
Right
because
on.
it doesn't impact them in any direct way.
Right, right.
You know what I
And
mean?
so, yeah, and so the struggle here might not be having any compartmentalization, but it might be in having either unhealthy or too much compartmentalization, where you're
Right.
not fully present in all of your relationships because you're not doing it well.
Right. Well,
Yeah,
in the definition of that phrase, it does say integrating, right?
yeah,
Integrating emotions, right? And
yeah.
so it might be just that if you are in a relationship with somebody who has a different set of needs and boundaries around information sharing, that might not be an aligned relationship for you. You might have to
Yeah.
reconsider whether or not that's good for you to be in that relationship. Because if you're struggling with compartmentalizing and you don't want to share everything with that person because you don't feel like you need to share everything with that person, but that
Mhm,
person has an expectation that you're doing that, then that could be a misalignment, a fundamental misalignment, right? And so that's where
mhm.
compartmentalization can be challenging, I think, amongst the other areas that we've discussed as well. Okay, next.
Insecurity,
Ooh, big one.
seeking external validation to address feelings of inadequacy, especially in comparison to a metamor, the metamor
Ooh,
being your partner's partner. So
yes.
I am feeling insecure, and so I decide I'm going to go have a secret rendezvous with somebody, not tell my partner about it, to get that little hit. I need a hit.
Right.
Right?
It doesn't have to be a rendezvous though, does it?
No, it could be a text message. It could be
Yeah.
going on an
Yeah.
app.
It could be on a yeah, it could be you having an inappropriate relationship with somebody else, right?
Mhm, mhm.
That by definition you're trying to get something from that person to feel validated, to feel handsome, to feel, not that I've ever done this, I have. But to in order to feel a certain way, right? In order to get that external validation that you're looking for.
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
then you're not telling your partner,
Hmm.
even though you have an agreement that you're sharing that sort of information.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it doesn't
Next one.
have to be,
Oh,
well,
sorry.
I'm just saying though that a breach of trust or cheating doesn't have to be an action taken of having intimacy physically with somebody directly. Does that
Thank you.
make sense?
Yes. Yeah. Thank you
Yeah.
for
It can be
clarifying.
other things like sexting. It can be keeping information that's relevant to the relationship, right? It could be other things as well. Okay. So next one, time constraints. Feeling that this is appropriate. Feeling there isn't enough time to pursue
Hurry
new
up.
connections with hurry up. Feeling there isn't enough time to pursue new connections within the agreed upon structure. Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Next. Okay. Desire for I might be a little too loud. I meant to dial that one down. Anyway, yeah. So time constraints. Feeling there isn't enough time to pursue new connections within the agreed upon structure. Okay. So what does that mean? Well, that means again, see polysaturation. That means honestly, if you're feeling that way, don't pursue other relationships.
Yeah. Oh,
Like
and can
just
I just say, it's not just time, right? It could be
sure.
your energy. It
Yeah.
could be resources. Time, energy, and resources are finite. Yeah.
Yeah. If you yeah, I mean, when I read this one, actually, I'm thinking to myself, if I'm feeling like there isn't enough time to pursue new connections within the agreed upon structure, okay, that's what it is. The agreed upon structure. So
Mhm.
then you need to have a conversation about the structure of your relationship. We need to change the structure of the relationship in order
Mhm.
for me to get that need met. Because I do
Yeah.
indeed want to pursue new connections. I just don't feel like I have enough time, energy, or resources under the current structure
Right.
to do
So,
so.
for example, you might have an agreement with somebody that you're going to see them 4 nights a week, right? And the other 3 nights you're seeing friends, family, or spending time doing laundry or self care, right? But 4 nights a week for one partner doesn't leave you a lot of time for yourself, your other connections that are your family and friends, and to date. So you might have to go to your partner and say, you know what, can we scale that back? Right? That structure
Mhm.
isn't working for me, for example.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this one also speaks to conflict avoidance, I think, not being willing to have that conversation.
Yeah.
Okay, the next one.
Desire for exclusivity. Oof. Secretly wanting monogamy with one partner while violating non-monogamous agreements. I have seen this happen actually. And this actually, I think, harkens back to revenge or resentment. It's that feeling of, I actually want monogamy. You're not giving it to me. You have other partners. I'm going to go out and have other partners, and I'm going to break our agreements doing so, so that you hurt like I hurt. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Doesn't feel very nice. It's not certainly anything that's going to help your relationship, and it certainly is harmful.
Mm-mm. Yeah, no, it's the secretly wanting monogamy bit, I think, is where if you're in a non-monogamous relationship and you find yourself secretly wanting monogamy, secretly being the operative word there, then I think, you know, it's incumbent upon you to speak up.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's okay to want monogamy, and it's okay to be monogamous to a partner. It's not okay to impose your needs onto them to create rules around what
Right.
they can do and cannot do.
Right.
Right.
Well said. Well said. Okay. So next one, fear of overburdening a partner, keeping secrets to quote unquote protect a partner from stress, insecurity, or jealousy.
Hmm.
Okay, I've done this before. I've actually this one actually happened to me after the fact. So I did a thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
I did a thing. I cheated, and then I justified not telling my partner as a
Hmm.
because I was protecting them. I'm like, well, they don't need to know. Like it's this information. There's nothing you can do about it. It's already happened. It's done,
Hmm.
right? Just telling them is just going to hurt them. So
Hmm.
I'll just manage it on my own, right? This is my cross to bear, right? I'm gonna, it's
Yeah.
almost kind of like I'm gonna take on this responsibility for myself. Maybe a little bit of victim story happening there. in terms of like
Martyrdom.
martyrdom.
Yeah.
That's the word I was looking for, not victim, but martyrdom. But
Mhm.
yeah, so I think, that's been something that happened to me a couple of times in my journey when I cheated,
Mhm.
was like, I'm not going to share this with my other partner because it's going to do nothing but cause harm. And there's no point in it. It's done. It's over. It's not a relationship I'm actively pursuing anymore. So what difference does it make? Right. And by the
Mhm.
way,
Yeah.
this is all fucking bullshit. This is all justification. It is.
Yeah.
It is. So this one tends to happen to me after the fact.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Experimentation, exploring a kink, fetish, or experience they assume their partners wouldn't support.
Ooh. Key word. What's the key word here?
What is it?
Assume.
Assume, which makes an ass out of you and me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. I think this one's pretty self-explanatory. But I'm gonna just say one sentence on it. Don't assume anything.
Hmm. Yeah. And if you ask and they're not into it, cool. You have more information now, right? Than you did before. And you've got clarity. And you know that they wouldn't support you having that experience with them, but you are in a polyamorous or an open relationship. And so, therefore, there's no reason why you can't find a partner who wants to do that,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right. And so, and also, just to be clear, I mentioned this earlier, but I think it's important to reiterate this, that a breach of trust doesn't happen if you're in a relationship where you have an agreement around information sharing. And so, for instance, if you have a kink, fetish, or experience that you want to explore with another partner, and you have an agreement like we do about information sharing and what we do or
Limited,
don't share, a limited
limited
information
information
agreement,
agreement.
right? There is stuff that you do with your partners, your other
Mhm.
partners, that are kink, fetish, and related, that I'm not interested in and therefore not aware of, right? And vice versa, same thing. Even if you
Right,
were interested, or even if I was interested, it doesn't mean that I assume or expect that I'm entitled to that information
right.
because of the agreement that we have,
And
right?
we have that in part for privacy to honor the connections that we're in, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And to honor our partners, our other partners' privacy as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then also, I mean, yeah, but anyway, you can see, we had a podcast about agreements and stuff, so
Yeah.
you can listen to that more. But it's important to note that a breach of trust doesn't happen if you're out exploring those kinds of other dynamics or other experiences with partners, and you have a limited information agreement, and you have clarity around what is and isn't okay to be shared.
Hmm.
It's
And you
the
get
fact that
consent
you're
to share.
yeah, and it's the fact that you're assuming that your partner wouldn't support it.
Yeah,
And even if they don't support it, it doesn't mean that you still can't do it.
that's right.
Okay.
Now, having said that, there are people who would really like to explore that particular something with that particular partner.
Yes.
But that's just a fundamental misalignment that you can't do anything about,
Right.
right? It's
Right.
like saying to somebody, I'd really like to smoke pot with you. And they're like, I don't smoke pot.
Right.
Okay. Then I guess I won't do that with you. You know?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just,
Yeah. Yeah.
we're not going to do that then.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Or yeah, like saying to me, "Hey, you want to sit down and enjoy this pineapple pizza?" No,
You're
no,
allergic.
I'm allergic to pineapple. So you can enjoy your pineapple pizza, but just don't do it around me,
Yeah.
right? And brush your
Yeah.
teeth before you kiss me again.
Right.
Right. That's actually a really good example of, wow, I could use that moving forward. Okay, next one.
It's yours.
Habit or past conditioning. Struggling to unlearn secrecy from monogamous relationship norms. I have no idea what they're talking about here. None. I am
Really?
fucking I am fucking clueless with this one.
Oh, okay. I'll tell you then.
I'm being sarcastic.
Oh, sorry.
Being very, very sarcastic. No,
Me being the teacher, I'm always like, okay, I'll
yeah,
help you with that.
yeah. No, I'm intimately familiar with this one, but you go ahead.
Well, I mean, you can talk about it. Monogamous relationship norms teach us that, uh, other relationships are not okay. And so when we have that mononormative programming running a script in our heads saying, this is not okay, I'm not allowed to have this, even when we're in an open or poly relationship, it can really mess with us. And the feeling of I'm not allowed to have this means I have to keep it quiet, I have to keep it under wraps, I have to be secretive, right? Yeah.
Mhm. There's also an element of um, um, some cultures actually, I wouldn't say the word encourage, but some cultures actually, it is acceptable to be in a quote unquote monogamous relationship, but have relationships on the side. There are
Hmm.
cultures in the world where that is acceptable. I won't say it's encouraged or anything like that, but it certainly is something that people are aware of that happen, but that they don't talk about.
Very much don't ask, don't tell.
Don't ask, don't tell, right?
Yeah.
And so there is a cultural aspect to this as well,
Do as
right?
you
When it
like on
comes
your business trips as long as I don't know about it, kind of
exactly,
thing.
but just understand that that's not technically monogamy. But anyway,
Right,
yeah,
right.
semantics, but yeah, it's not technically monogamy.
Okay,
Okay,
I'm going to
next
hit
one.
the next one. Addiction or compulsion, acting on compulsive behaviors or sex addiction that override agreed upon boundaries. So you're getting again that novelty, the dopamine rush, the variety, the thrill seeking, right? And also it can actually be an addiction. So I have a few clients that I've worked with now whose partners are sex addicts. And when they're in recovery, it's a much different relationship than when they're not. And so what I would say that this should be treated like every other addiction, honestly,
Mm-hmm.
right? There are support groups, there are ways to manage it. There are loads of books and lots of therapy available regarding it. If that's available to you, please seek help.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
I do want to point out the language in that one. I think
Mhm.
as you read it that second time, I was like, I don't. That's not sitting well with me. So I changed it a little bit, and I think I want to express this change because I think it's more in alignment with the way we see the difference between boundaries and agreements.
Mhm.
So acting on compulsive behaviors or sex addiction that overrides existing agreements.
Yeah. Agreed upon boundaries. We don't use the term boundaries when we talk about agreements. Boundaries are personal to the individual.
Right. And they're not
Agreements are
agreed
based
upon
on
by
them.
anybody.
Right. Yeah.
Nobody has to agree with your boundaries,
Right.
is
A
what we're
boundary
trying to
is a
say.
boundary. That's
Right.
it.
Like it or not, it's still a boundary. Right.
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah, so I just wanted to change the language around that a little bit just to say consistent. I didn't
Yeah. I love
realize that
that.
before when we put this together, but yeah.
Thanks. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for being open to that. I appreciate you.
Of course.
Of
Go ahead with
course.
the next one.
We're gonna get schmaltzy here for a second, weren't we? I
No.
love you. Love you. Fuck that shit. Okay. Emotional immaturity. How appropriate. You couldn't plan that shit better. That was not planned. We promise that was not planned in any way, shape, or form. Yeah. Anyway, that's great.
Fuck.
All right. I'm not immature. You are.
Shut
Okay.
up.
Shut up.
You shut up.
Whatever you say bounces off me and sticks to you. Wait, I'm rubber,
I
you're glue. Whatever
remember.
you say bounces off me and sticks to you. All right.
Okay.
So, emotional immaturity, lacking the skills to navigate open communication, vulnerability, or conflict. Okay.
Okay.
So, I got one real quick answer to this. Yeah. Call us,
Get help.
get help. Yeah.
We can help you with this.
Yeah. Yeah. This is fundamentals of the work that we do.
Yeah.
And it should be fundamental to any work that's done around healthy relating. If you're
Mhm.
unable to emotionally articulate how you're feeling and what you want and stuff, it's going to make so many more things challenging that's just unnecessary. So having
Mhm.
the schools, having the tools and the skills to be able to manage and then also effectively communicate your emotional life to your partners and the people that matter is just paramount to healthy relating. And
Mhm.
it's something that we do every day, all day with our clients.
Yes, we do. Okay, last cultural or social pressures. concealing behavior to avoid judgment from family, friends, or coworkers. And I would even go so
Oh
far
yeah.
as to say, it might even be community, because there are like very heavily conservative areas of the world. So you're concealing behaviors because you're afraid of judgment from outside sources, which means you're avoiding the conversation with your partner. And that's the person that you should be connecting to on this, right? That's the
Hmm.
person that you should feel you can connect to, even if you're afraid, even if you're worried about their response or how it might make them feel, or that they'll be uncomfortable with your desire to have another relationship. Speaking up, to them should be a safe space. If it's not,
Hmm. Call us.
well, and we need to consider that relationship as, is that in alignment with you,
Yeah, that's
right?
right. That's right. That's what came to mind when you started talking was like, if it's not a relationship where so if you're concerned about the reactions that people will have outside of your relationship, so not your partner necessarily, but the reactions of other people, if you tell what you've done or what you would like to do or whatever, um, and you can't tell your partner that, I think there's definitely some work that can be done around identifying where you're aligned,
Mm-hmm.
and identifying what exactly support is and what it can look like. Because
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes we think support is, yeah, I'm totally on board, let's do that. But sometimes it's not that. Sometimes support is, you know what, I don't get it. I think it's weird. It's not for me. But if it's something that you want to do, I love you, and I can support it from afar.
Right.
And I got your back if it ever comes. In this case, if it ever backfires on you, right? We're
Mm-hmm.
in this
Yeah.
together. We don't have to be doing it together, but we can be in it together,
Yes. Right.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, a lot of this discussion today has been about, how to have a connection with your partner where you feel you can bring these needs to them, these insecurities, these fears, these wants. And I think that is the crux of the matter. If you have built that, you're going to feel a lot safer. We have one more.
We do. We do.
Mhm,
Yeah.
go ahead.
So the last one is testing the relationship, breaking agreements to provoke a reaction or reassess relationship dynamics. Now, I get it. I get why you might think that this would be something that you would want to do, but I'm just going to be blunt here and say this is really a childish way to go about it. It's really an immature way to go about it. If
Yeah.
you want to reassess your relationship dynamics, have a conversation,
Hmm.
right? You know,
Yeah.
if you're testing boundaries, testing agreements is that's what's the word I'm looking. It's passive aggressive. It's
Hmm.
unhealthy behavior. I'm trying to use language that's less judgmental, but honestly, it's fucking immature and childish. I'm
Yeah.
just gonna call it what it is. And if you
Yeah.
find yourself in a place where you're doing that, I'm not saying that you as a person are immature or childish. That's not what I'm saying. But that behavior needs to be looked at because that
Right.
behavior is problematic. Why do you feel
It's
the need to engage in childish and immature behavior when
mhm,
really what you need to do is have a conversation with your partner about your current dynamics and the fact that it might not be working for you?
right on. There's part of you that is feeling like a child, I think, in this,
Oh,
and
yeah, that's a good
feeling,
one.
like I want to behave badly. I want to test you and see if you're going to show up for me. I want to see how far I can take this
Yeah,
and see if you're going to stick around, right?
yeah, yeah.
And
That's
that's
really good.
probably
Yeah,
from some sort of, childhood part. We do a lot
yeah,
of parts work.
yeah.
And that can be really, you know, challenging, but also informative once you recognize what that is and how it's speaking
Hmm.
to you, and you can make changes. It is
Hmm.
possible. So,
Yeah. If you find yourself inclined to want to do those things, then seek out some support, seek out some
mhm,
help,
mhm,
talk to people, us, therapist, whatever, and just
Yeah.
say what, because 99.9% of the time, 100% of the time, there's an underlying factor, an underlying trauma that's probably informing
Yeah.
the way you're seeing this. And there are healthier ways to go about getting that need met. And that's
For
true
sure.
for all of these. That's true for all of these, of course.
Mhm.
Um, and then ultimately, you started to touch on this, but I don't know if you finished or not because you realized there was another one. But ultimately, I think what all of these things have in common is a sense of safety, a sense of
Mm.
security in your relationship. And the reason I call it a breach of trust, and the reason I like the term breach of trust is because trust is foundational to relationships. If I can't trust my partner with these parts of myself, then I need to reevaluate why I'm in the relationship.
And I'm going to add a caveat there because I have trust issues. So I'm just going to say it's okay that you don't 100% trust others if you've been
Right,
through a lot of trauma, like me. So,
right.
if you've been through an abusive relationship, et cetera, you may have issues with trust. And I would say, I want to get to the 80% trust point with my partners. And that's where I'm at. And so that feels really solid to me. It does feel like
Mhm.
a safe space most of the time. And also choose your timing when you're going to come to your partner. Recognize that there's a way to communicate, a time to communicate. We can help you with that, right?
Right.
Going through all that.
Oh,
So we're just going to, okay, we got to
something else
wrap
just came
up,
to
but
me.
go
Something
ahead.
else just came to me. And
Yeah.
what you just shared was incredible and beautiful. I want to say something else in addition to that. And that is that trust yourself.
Mm,
Trust yourself.
yes.
Trust that even if the outcome isn't what you hoped for or wanted, trust that you're still in your integrity. Trust
Hmm.
that you're gonna be okay.
Hmm.
Now, of course, the caveat, there's always a caveat. The caveat is that if you're in an abusive relationship, or you feel like you're in harm's way, whether that be emotionally, physically, or financially, that's different. But what I'm referring to is if your relationship doesn't have those elements to it, just trust that if you go to your partner and you say this thing and they end up not being on the same page with you, that you're still going to be okay, that there is still a way forward for you,
Hmm.
even though it might not feel like that in the moment.
Absolutely good point. Thanks for bringing that up. I think that's a perfect place to end.
Yes, I agree.
Okay, then. And remember,
Choose love.
and keep it kind.
We'd love to hear your comments, questions, or topic suggestions, and don't forget to subscribe.
And you're invited to join our Facebook group, Empowered Poly Relationship Support and Advice.
You can reach out to us on our websites at gregmillion.com
and at leannemillion.com
or follow us on Instagram at thegregmillion
and at Leanne Million.
Do you want to go to Costco now?
Oh, but what about the doggy? What when we get back?
We'll do the doggy when we get back,
All right then.
and then we can do the nappy when we get back.
All right, the
The
Costco, the
not the
doggy, and the nappy.
Yeah, they're not the nappy though, because it's
Not
not a
not the
nappy.
nappy.
No, I don't need you to do my nappy. I'm
We're gonna take
fine.
a kip. I think that's what
A
they call
kip.
it. A kip.
It's a kip.
I think so.
Okay.
I think the
All
British
right.
say kip.
Toodaloo.
Okay, toodaloo.